Thank you, everyone. And hello, welcome to our masterclass of today, our masterclass that will be with Cassandra Vieten on Changemakers for game changers for Changemakers. I'm very happy with this opportunity to learn more from Cassandra and her work, and also to get to know those of you who are taking part in this session. Thank you so much for joining us. And let me also already start by inviting you to write down in the chat box if you haven't done so, just to let us know, and others who you are and where you are located. I am Miriam Vilela. I'm the coordinator of this UNESCO chair on education for sustainable development and executive director of the Earth Charter International. And we are based here in Costa Rica on this beautiful campus of the University for Peace that is located on the outskirts of San Jose. This session of today is part of our Education Center Masterclass program that we organized this year under the umbrella of the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter. And this chair was established 10 years ago with the purpose to work at that intersection of sustainability, values, ethics, and education on research and education programs. Our masterclass normally lasts not longer than 2 hours, maybe an hour and 45 minutes or so. And the first part involves a presentation from our main guest speaker with some interaction with me. And then we have a moment for some conversation among you and Q&A in a plenary. So our session today brings Cassandra to share with us some ideas on how to better understand ourselves and the role of consciousness, and also to give us some elements or ideas on models to design and implement powerful and engaging approaches to individual and social change. So the Earth Charter International really works in that with that higher purpose of contributing to individual and social transformation. So let me introduce you briefly to Cassandra, who has a PhD in clinical psychology. She had it from the California Institute of Integral Studies. She has worked for many years on research projects related to human consciousness, as well as mind and body health and well-being. She is the executive director of the John Brick Mental Health Foundation, and just a few days ago it was the World Mental Health Day. So it's very interesting that we are having this masterclass today, very related to your work. But I know that you were also part of the Institute of Noetic Science, IONS, for many years. You worked there and you were the CEO and president. So Kathy, thank you so much and welcome. Can I start by asking you to share with us a little bit about your journey, especially what brought you to this field of work where you are at now?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here. And thank you, Miriam, for the invitation. I love the Earth Charter, and I'm 1000% behind the mission of Earth Charter International. So thank you for the amazing work that you all are doing in the world. As Miriam said, well, first of all, I'm coming to you from San Diego, California today. And I trained initially as a clinical psychologist because I was interested in helping people who were suffering. And as I went through my degree program, I was training to become a psychotherapist. And I do still sometimes see patients, very infrequently, but sometimes still see patients. I became very clear that I wanted to make changes that would affect thousands or millions of people. Of course, this is the hubris of being 21 years old at the time. And so I went into research thinking, well, I want to make discoveries that will change not only my patients' lives, but maybe change the way we look at addiction, suffering, mood disorders, and human behavior, both individually how we behave in ways that either benefit or are self-destructive, and collectively how we engage in behaviors that either benefit society or are destructive towards society and the planet. And so that led me on a long journey of learning how to do research and working at the University of California, San Francisco for 12 years and getting grants from the National Institutes of Health in the United States and California State and several private foundations for this work. And then I was lucky enough to find the Institute of Noetic Sciences, because throughout my training journey, I had a strong affinity for spiritual traditions, both Eastern philosophy and indigenous traditions, that I experienced as holding keys to some of the things that the West, especially the United States, was missing. So the wisdom of these traditions was influential in my own life, and I thought it might be helpful for addressing some of these problems as well. But I really wanted to bring science and these wisdom traditions together. And as you may know, science is very resistant to being contaminated by any kind of spirituality or metaphysics or religion, for good reason. And sometimes religion and spirituality are resistant to being contaminated by science and measurement and things like that, because it should be faith. You shouldn't need proof. But over time, we've all learned that that is a false distinction, that religion and spirituality can learn from science and that science can learn from religion and spirituality. They are two different ways of knowing reality, but they can, if not be combined, they can at least begin to become friends and have coffee from time to time and share what they each are learning. So that's what I've been trying to do for my whole life. The work that I'm going to share today really came out of my dismay when the United States elected what I saw and it's understood to be going in the absolute wrong direction. And I don't want to, denigrate or disrespect anyone on the line who might have different beliefs than I do, because we all have valid beliefs that we have the right to hold. But in about 2016, I personally became very concerned about the direction we were headed. And I wasn't just concerned about the side that I didn't agree with. I was even more concerned about the side I did agree with, because I thought the people who were working for peace and justice and healthcare and the things that I care about, women's rights, Black Lives Matter, planetary sustainability, were doing a poor job at how they were communicating what they wanted to happen in the world. And that poor job was resulting in dire consequences. And so I brought together a group of social scientists, neuroscientists, linguists, spiritual teachers, psychologists, and others to try to help understand, why were we who were working for good in the world doing such a bad job? And why were we doing things that were unintentionally counterproductive to our cause? And so I spent a couple of years putting together this curriculum that I'm going to share just a little bit with you today. So that was a long answer, Miriam.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you, so I look forward to hearing from you. I thought you were going to share your presentation, but let me then start by also share with you that a few years ago we developed a tagline or a slogan for the work we do, precisely because we're looking at ways in which we can improve the way in which we communicate what the Earth Charter is all about and what is the Earth Charter movement. And therefore, we identified this slogan called that says, turning conscience into action for thriving Earth. So and then I realized that actually many people don't even understand what conscience means. And I would like to ask you if you could share your thoughts on what's the difference you see between consciousness and conscience.
Yes, so obviously they come from the same word, the same root, conscience and consciousness. And they overlap in a way. So it's about being awake and being aware. Being awake and being aware. And you might even say it's about seeing things clearly. Seeing things clearly. Maybe we could even say not being in denial, being aware of the ways that we are unskillful at times and the way that others can be unskillful in their care for themselves, others, and the planet. And then instead of just staying with that awareness, taking that into action. And so the first step is the consciousness, the conscience, because it's so painful and distressing to see things clearly. If we all really saw clearly, we would be ecstatic and blissful and in absolute despair all at once. And of course, the greatest poets and writers have always understood this, that it's the agony and the ecstasy. This is what life is. It's the whole enchilada is one of the phrases we would use, the good and the bad. And so when we're truly awake, we see the wide range of positive, of negative. We do everything we can to advance healthy, skillful, useful, positive, helpful, and everything we can to change what's not working. So having that consciousness or that conscience is important. And then marrying it with action is the real next step.
Great. So your work on consciousness and imagination and the vast experience you have had with IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science, can you share with us some of the key learnings you have had?
Sure. So right now I'm at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination at the University of California, San Diego. And I definitely recommend that you look us up at imagination.ucsd.edu. I've been here for 3 years, and formerly I was at the Institute of Noetic Sciences for 18 years, since I was just a baby, or at least since I had my baby. And the Institute of Noetic Sciences is really about elevating human consciousness in ways that allow us to understand that we are interconnected, that the Earth, the planet, is a collective whole intelligence, and that we all around the entire planet and the planet itself are not separate. There's no way that what I do doesn't affect something else about the planet, what I think, what I feel, how I behave, what I buy, what I eat, what I wear, what I drive, affects hundreds, if not thousands or millions of people every day. And when we understand that interconnectedness at an experiential level, and it's backed by science, we begin to shift our worldview in a way that makes it very difficult for us to engage in behaviors that benefit ourselves while harming others. So it takes a lot of unconsciousness to continue to do behaviors that benefit yourself but harm others. But that is what many, many people are still doing because, we haven't come up with solutions. But when we can actually completely understand and experience that interconnectedness, that lack of separation, it transforms our own lives. And it begins to help transform the world, because not only do we cease engaging in behaviors that benefit ourselves and harm others, we feel naturally drawn to contribute in some way towards the health and well-being of ourselves, our families, our communities, and the planet. And that way can be anything from, starting an entire NGO, multinational NGO that is seeking to feed 1 million people or plant 1 million trees, to walking through your world in a way that is kind and loving, or doing something to clean up your local stream, or, so it's not really about scale. It's about doing what you are meant to do to bring this into the world, which oddly, a lot of us seek happiness. We're seeking happiness all the time. And we come to learn that it's not really about happiness, that joy comes from serving, making a contribution, having a purpose, and following through with it. And so that joy becomes central, that service becomes central. And so that's a lot of the work we did at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And now at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination, we're recognizing that every solution to problems that seem intractable, that seem like they've been facing society for millennia, or new problems, every solution starts with a seed of imagination, that someone asks the question, what if we did it differently? Or they have a vision of, I think I have an idea about how we could do this differently. And that leads to societal movements. It leads to inventions of products. And so the interesting part is that we haven't really established a science of imagination. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know why it happens. We don't know about the neurodiversity of imagination. Why do some people have visual imagination? Why do some people have verbal? Some people have mathematical, logical imagination. And then how do we enhance it? How do we employ it? And so how many of you in school, as you were a child being raised and all the way through college, took a course in how to access and leverage your imagination? Probably not that many. But that's key. It's absolutely key to where we're going. So those are some of the things that we've been working on.
Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting because we are working here on education for sustainable development, quite aligned with the new education agenda of UNESCO, and trying to transform education. And one of the elements that it's being identified is to enhance our capacity to envision a different future.
Yes, great, wonderful.
And then it really embed this notion in education experiences and education systems.
Mm-hmm.
But what you said about consciousness and the work with at the Institute of Noetic Science, the IONS, it's very similar to the higher purpose of the Earth movement, which is to deepen and expand human consciousness with regards to how we relate to one another and how we relate to the large living world, this human and nature connection. So I can see as cousins or twins in terms of the work and areas of research. So Cassie, why don't you share with us your presentation, and we'll come back to some Q&A after. Is that okay?
Great, great. Yeah, and I'm happy to just address the question I just saw flash up, which is imagination and intuition. How are they different and how are they related? I think intuition, from my perspective, is overlapping with imagination. However, it's a bit more receptive, whereas imagination is more moving into the future or moving into another space. It's a more active. So intuition, when I intuit something, I'm perceiving something, and I often perceive it in my imagination. You think about intuitive healers, they will, they don't necessarily get a diagnosis in their mind in words. They might see a big rock in someone's knee and they say, oh, you're having some knee pain, aren't you? And so it's intuitive knowledge that's incoming, whereas imagination, might be the next step where they say, how could I work with this? I'm seeing a blue light moving from my hands into your knee. That's kind of the more proactive. So I do think that they are overlapping, but maybe there's a slightly more receptive side to intuition and a slightly more proactive side to imagination. Okay, so let's move on to this presentation. All right, can you see the slides? Great. So again, thank you so much for having me here. And the reason we call it Game Changers for Changemakers is we hope that these tools might change the game a little bit. So we started off by calling this consciousness, communication, and change, and coming up with 12 principles, which I know I'm not expecting you to read here. This is the group of scientists that we pulled together to say, what are maybe, the key things that we would want to teach people to be more effective change makers. And so the tagline for this is bringing science and wisdom practices together to boost the effectiveness of change agents working for a more just and sustainable planet. So I'm acknowledging here all of the people who contributed to this, as well as our interns, our support team, and our funders, especially Olivia Hansen and the Synthesis Foundation. And so just feel what it feels like to look into the face of this baby. And I ask you to come into this with an open mind, with a beginner's mind. Many of you have been change making for much longer than I've been alive. But to come in with an open mind. And also we'll come back to why I showed this baby later in the talk. So as an agent of change, you may be unintentionally engaging in activities that are counterproductive. You may be not doing some relatively simple things that would work better. And you could be paying more attention to what you're saying and doing than how you are being in your change making. And so what science tells us is that we tend to over-inform when we're trying to make change. Too much information often results in people shutting down and something similar to analysis paralysis. What we know from science is that facts don't change people. People change people. And so I just want to stop and really say that if you walk away from this talk with nothing more than that, that's what I'd like you to walk away with, is that most of us who are trying to make change in the world spend about 80% of our times informing people about the problem that we're concerned about. And if they don't hear us or they don't make a change, we figure we didn't inform them enough. We just have to inform them more. And then we think, well, we just have to inform them more loudly or more urgently. And the truth is that people have a built-in hardwired system in their brain that is built to resist new information that doesn't match their current meaning system. And so when you present information that doesn't match their current meaning system, and then you do it over and over again, you're having the opposite effect of what you want, because they're actually, every time you do it, they're building a new wall against the new information. Now, so that's one important point that I'll make that we'll come back to. Science also tells us that conventional motivational tactics don't really work, not in the long term. They may work in a short-term way, but they don't really win hearts and minds. Getting your audience to be outraged, infuriated, and distressed can cause short-term action in your base, but it does not last. And it alienates the people who are on the fence, or the people who are undecided. So if you want to motivate long-term behavior change, it's more about connecting and listening and making it personal. Connecting, listening, and making it personal, as opposed to trying to get people upset, afraid, distressed. Because again, we have these hardwired systems that when we get stressed, when we feel like we're in threat, somebody's threatening us or our belief system, we become less likely to learn and more likely to defend. So when we get people outraged, infuriated, like, don't you know, the icebergs are melting and the oceans are receding and, we've got to change this right now. You're getting them scared, upset, threatened by your tone of voice, by what you're sharing, and paradoxically making it less likely that they will hear you. Now, sometimes this can make a short-term change. They might make a donation or get riled up for a few days, but then it'll backfire because they'll be like, I don't ever want to be part of that conversation again. In fact, sometimes their donation is paying to get out of it, which we don't really want them to pay to get out of the conversation as much as we want their funding, right? So a third principle that we're going to be sharing is that people are moved to action more by an inspiring and compelling story and vision than by tons of information about what's not working. So your job as a change maker changes from being informative and persuasive to connecting inside of yourself with the source of your inspiration and realizing how that impacts your audience so that you actually have energy and light almost are shining through you as you're speaking to your audience. I'm sure you've had this experience with speakers from time to time. That is what people remember. That's what people remember. And if you're lucky, because they feel safe and inspired and open, one piece of information might get in, not 40 pieces of information. Another key principle of this is people's decisions and actions are driven by their perception of who they think they are and where they feel they belong. So when somebody votes, or when somebody decides where to donate, or whether or not they're going to change from plastic straws to biodegradable straws in their restaurant, it's not because of the information. It's because of who they think they are. I am the type of person that would change to a biodegradable straw. One great example of this is there was a test done where in one city, they asked people, they put up big signs in the community. And in one city, they said, please recycle your plastic bottles, keep them out of the landfill. It'll save the planet. In the other city, they said, please join the 73% of your neighbors who are recycling their plastic bottles. Which one do you think was more effective? The second one, because it's about who they are and what community they see themselves as a part of. So when we are doing change making, we want to be the kind of community that people would want to join. We want to help people feel like they are the kind of person who would do this. Now, going back to my original inspiration, or maybe there's an opposite word, de-inspiration for doing this back in 2016 when I was wondering why the people that I agreed with in leadership were doing such a bad job. One of the ways they were doing a bad job is that they were not a community that anyone would want to join. They were harsh, criticizing, judgmental, arrogant, mean, harried, anxious, freaked out. I mean, it was really like, we have to do something about blah, 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 right? And there's 10 of them, 20 of them. Why would anyone want to join that community? It's not attractive. It doesn't feel like a place I want to go. Whereas the people I disagreed with were wearing red baseball hats and being like, yeah. And even though I totally disagreed with them, I was like, well, hey, if I were on the fence, I know which community I would want to join. So we have to think about who people think they are and what community are we presenting to those people? Is it something they can identify with? Are we actually welcoming them? Because a lot of the rhetoric when we are trying to make change, accidentally, we don't do it on purpose. We accidentally say, all of you who are doing this are stupid. Please join us. Why would anybody join a group of people who was calling them stupid? Or all of you who disagree with me don't care. Join us so you can care. Why would I want to join somebody telling me I don't care, right? So we've got to change our invitation into a community and being type of people that people want to be around. Finally, authenticity really does win the day. This is an image of a young woman who gave a talk after a school shooting in Florida in the United States, massive school shooting. And she was in Washington, D.C. at a giant rally. And typically people would get up and do the kind of thing that I've been mimicking, we have to change gun control right now, that kind of stuff. She got up, said a few words, and then said, can we please stop for 60 seconds, which is the amount of time the shooter was killing my friends, and just stood there and looked into the audience with tears rolling down her face. It was more powerful than anything she could have ever said. And so genuine and heartfelt dignity and trustworthiness is what wins hearts and minds in the end, authenticity. And so many times when we are change makers, it's not that we aren't authentic or heartfelt, it's just that we sometimes think we have to perform or we think we have to act. And we don't really need to act and perform. We just need to share what we care about deeply with feeling, with heart, with openness, with vulnerability. We don't even have to have all the answers. In fact, sometimes it's better if we don't have all the answers. If we just say, I'm noticing that this way of being on the planet is unskillful, and I'm doing some research about how we could do it differently. And I think I've found a few things that I want to share with you. That's just completely different than let me school you on how things should be done. So we often say that people make decisions and take action based on 10% information, 10% motivation, and 80% because they have a personal perspective shift, because they've been inspired, because they've understood their identity was in alignment with what was being said. They've been welcomed into a community. They have felt the genuineness or authenticity of the person sharing, which means that you and we as change makers have to do a lot of work on ourselves. We have to do a lot of work on ourselves to be the kind of person or to be the kind of community that is conducive to people sharing shifting their perspectives. So, as I mentioned, sometimes we are just flummoxed by people seeming to be immune to facts. What we think we need to address is their rational conscious mind. So we try to explain to them all the different reasons why we need to clean up the rivers or clean up the oceans or replant the forests or stop using plastic or whatever the things are. The truth is, we don't really need to address their conscious mind. We need to address their non-conscious. So this is part of consciousness. It's just the part that we're not always aware of. Like if you drive to work in the morning and you don't always remember how you got there, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things that we are not aware of that we do on automatic pilot. We have tons of implicit biases and automatic behaviors, luckily, because if we didn't, every day we'd have to recreate we'd be babies every morning and have to learn everything again. So it's good that we do this. But most of the reason that we engage in behaviors or make decisions is based on that non-conscious part of us, not the conscious part. So here we are as change makers, bashing the conscious part over and over and over and over again and saying, why aren't they changing their mind? It's obvious, because we haven't reached the non-conscious part of them. And that's most of what we need to reach. How do people's non-conscious parts of them get reached? Not usually by words, logic, facts, more often by stories, images, emotions, connections. And so we've got to start bringing in those things into our change making. So again, we kind of estimate that we don't want to throw information out. It's important. We do want to share information with people, but it's probably like 10% of what we need to share. Here are the things that actually lead to people's beliefs and behaviors: culture, norms, economics, life experiences, religious and spiritual beliefs, how stressed or threatened they feel at that moment, their implicit assumptions and biases. And information doesn't really affect any of those things. So we gotta let go of this idea of over-informing. Motivation would be the next thing. And we think, okay, if it's not the information, I've got to make you feel motivated. These are many ways that we motivate people. So if you think recently about trying to motivate someone in your own life to do something, or try to persuade someone, maybe even close your eyes and think about a time when you were trying to persuade someone of something very important to you. Could be a kid or a partner or someone at work or society. And probably used some of these things, going from the upper left, which are sort of the more healthy ways, all the way down to the lower right. I hope none of you have used these ways recently, and everything in between. These are a lot of the ways that we motivate folks. But these conventional ways of motivating are actually not as effective as we think they should be. So what does motivate people? This shift in worldview that I've been talking about. And so the way people view the world and how they act in it relies on an ecosystem of factors that are intersecting. And we really have to address almost all of them to make real change. So we call this the ecosystem of change. That there are many factors we have to provide in order to make it most likely that people might shift their view about a topic. So in this session, we won't be able to go into every single one of these. Let's see where we are with time. Good. 1 second, everybody. Okay, so we won't be able to go over all of these, but what I will say is that in general, instead of all the things that I just said, we want to open people's minds to a new possibility by sharing our emotion and our vision about it. We want to tell a new story that they can get behind and believe in. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't say, "We have a problem." He said, "I have a dream." And so when somebody talks about their vision, their dream, we're offering a new narrative, we're offering a new story. We've got to immediately follow that up with precise ways that people can get engaged immediately in the new story. If we don't get them engaged, they will snap back like a rubber band into their old way of thinking. And it can be something just as small as signing them up for an email newsletter, signing them up for texts, asking them to volunteer for 1 hour on this project, getting them action engaged, providing this set of practices and tools that they can use to be engaged. A good example of what I mean by this is in the United States, Al Gore, quite a while ago, had the movie An Inconvenient Truth, which was about the environment and all the issues with it. It was very good. However, in the end, it didn't offer any ways for people to get involved or to do anything about it. So they walked out of the theater just feeling, reeling. And their only choice psychologically was to block it out or to decide it wasn't true or to just forget, make it a fog, put a fog on it, right? Because they didn't have any way to do anything about it and it was too big for their psyche to hold. What he could have done was say, if you agree with me right now, there's a postcard underneath your chair. I want you to write this postcard to your leader. And by writing this, we're also getting your email address. We're going to invite you to a series of ongoing Zoom calls. There's got to be a way right away for people to get involved. So what we've done so far is we have opened people's minds to a new possibility. That's what foster accommodation means. We are offering a new possible story. I believe there is a way for us to have a clean forest and river in my community. And here are some ways that I've learned that we might be able to do it. And I want to say right now that if you are with me in creating cleaner rivers and cleaner forests, I've left you with a postcard. I want you to text to this number. We're going to have a Zoom call tomorrow to get you started. We're going to break into small pods. We're going to come back and, it's got to be right then. Because you're capturing this magic moment in time where you have a small opening. The other thing that is very important here at the bottom is that we not only give them practices and tools, we give them a community, a context and a community that they don't feel like they're doing it alone. And this can be everything from, I think I mentioned to you the red baseball hats. That was powerful. Anybody wearing a red baseball hat for 4 whole years, maybe 5, knew immediately that they were a part of something. It's not something I agreed with, but they did a great job of it. And so we have to do similar things, but maybe not so superficial, that immediately when they send their email address to us, we say, thank you for becoming a member of a community that is making change. Your membership in this community makes a difference. So I'm sending you this blue sticker to put on your car, or this purple pin to put on your jacket, or whatever it is. It sounds superficial, but boy, I'll tell you, humanity, we love that kind of stuff. We love that kind of stuff because it makes us understand what tribe we're in. We can also share with people the other influential or recognizable people that they're joining, because like it or not, we are still pack animals, or at least there's a part of us that are still pack animals. So as soon as somebody joins or sends an email or expresses interest or clicks or whatever you wanted them to do, it's very helpful to say, you have just joined Lady Gaga, Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't know who it is, right? People that are sort of well-known. What it does is it helps people feel like, oh, I'm not just a member of a community, I'm a member of the community. You know, I have people who I know are well known that now I'm connected with because I made this decision to vote, to donate, to send my email address, to join this webinar. I want to stop here and say that some of this could feel manipulative. And I do think there's a difference between using science of behavior change to encourage people and manipulating them through fear, hatred, their lower selves, right? So we don't ever want to manipulate people to do anything that they wouldn't want to do or that wouldn't be healthy for them. So when I'm giving talks about things that I care about a lot and somebody comes up and says, you know, I don't agree with you about this, and here's why, I listen to them and I say, okay, I hear you. I don't agree with you either, but I appreciate you being here and I appreciate you coming up to talk to me. That's different than manipulation. So, you know, we're going to do all these things to make the environment as conducive as we possibly can to people living into higher consciousness and their higher self. But we do want to be careful that we don't fall into the manipulative, colonizing, missionary position. Like I always say, we have to move beyond the missionary position. It's a joke. It's supposed to be a joke.
I actually, may I just interject here to say
Please.
how much I appreciate this, because it has been, I think, the challenge of for many people working in the field of trying to influence social transformation, in coming with a tone that is not helpful. It's only helpful for people who are in the same sphere of energy and the same tone. I think all of us, we have had the experience of trying to engage with people who are in another sphere, that how difficult it is to make bridges, especially if that tone of imposing or verticality. And I must say that I have, over the past 20 years, I have been trying to emphasize that the Earth Charter, engaging with Earth Charter with people, should not come with that tone of here is the Earth Charter, read it, know by heart, learn by heart, and implement it as it is, because it's not helpful and or practical, not desired either. Is more a tool to engage in asking questions. And but I have a question about coming back to consciousness. How can we recognize our level of consciousness? We're talking about expanding consciousness, deepening our consciousness with regards to our role in this world. How can we recognize our level of consciousness and other people's level that are around us, levels of consciousness?
Yeah, I feel like I have two opposite answers to that question, so we can explore it together. One is that it's very hard to recognize your level of consciousness because you don't know that there's any other level of consciousness. Everybody thinks they're very awake and aware. And that is part of how we're built, because we just don't know that there is anything. If we don't know there's anything different, we can't know that we're not as awake. On the other hand, I think we know when we're operating at a higher level of consciousness, when we feel aligned with our purpose and our meaning, we feel like we're making a contribution to the health and well-being of ourselves, our loved ones, our communities, and the planet. That we start to feel like we are in a collaboration with other people, with circumstances, and even with the planet. And if you're a spiritual person, with God or source, and that we're living in that collaboration over time. So things actually are moving with more ease, more flow. You're getting good signals from your body, from your mind, from your heart, from your friends, from your environment, that you're in alignment. And I think almost everybody knows what it feels like to feel in alignment or out of alignment. It's not good or bad. It's just, sometimes it's very painful even when you're in alignment. It's not like it's happy or sad or good or bad. It's more like I feel that I am making an important contribution. I feel like I'm cooperating and collaborating with others and spirit and planet to advance this solution. And signs that you're not in alignment would be, maybe you feel like you're making a contribution, but you feel sick, you feel exhausted, you feel fatigued. People aren't collaborating. You're hitting roadblocks at every turn. Seems like you're beating your head against a brick wall. People don't understand what you're saying. Your activities aren't getting people attending them. Like there's tons of signs that somehow you're not in alignment. And it all starts with getting ourselves in alignment. And often that takes secular or spiritual practices to get ourselves clear and aligned. Self-care, good sleep, good food, time off, time in nature. Often as change makers, we think there's not a minute to waste. I have to save the world today. So I got to work 12 hours a day, and it doesn't matter if I feel bad or if I feel tired or if I'm not getting lunch today or if I'm not taking a walk in nature. It does matter. It does matter, because who you're impacting can feel when your message is going through not a clean filter, I guess I would say. You want to be a clear window, a clear channel. And when you're not, people can feel it.
Totally. Let me bring two voices that shared something in the chat box. One is Anne-Catherine, who is joining us from Holland, I think, and just made a point or comment. So less facts and more walking the talk.
Yes.
And
yes.
Norman, who is also joining us from Holland, said, so how do you deal with resistance?
Yeah, interestingly, that's a great question. I want to go back to the ecosystem slide here to answer that, which is that we made it through, opening people's minds to a new possibility, offering a new narrative, a new story, providing them with immediate ways to practice or engage or use tools, helping them feel like they're a part of a community and that there's a context for what they're doing. But the next two are really about resistance. So one of the things we need to do is understand that there are people who have been harmed by either the previous system that we're trying to change or by people like us who've tried to change the system. We have to allow for the shadow work. We have to allow for people to heal before we expect them to make a big change. So we may need to listen very carefully to people before we expect them to change. So I'll give you an example that a vignette that we use in our trainings where imagine the CEO of a large corporation, a female CEO, maybe she has 5,000 employees in a production line, and we do a year of work with her on shifting the sustainability of waste, how they deal with waste, and how they use certain materials. So we're shifting them from non-toxic to toxic, toxic to non-toxic materials and reducing their waste. So we go back 6 months later and we say, okay, how's it going? And they've completely reverted to the old way of doing it after all that work and all that time. And we say, what a hypocrite. This is terrible. What a waste of time. Well, what really happened for this woman is that she was raised by an extremely domineering and very successful corporate father who taught her to be tough and told her that she could never show weakness. And so her value for herself is that she's tough and she never shows weakness. She's just as strategic as any man out there. When she brought a slideshow to her stakeholders and board members to say, look, I've made these changes, and yes, they're going to be more expensive in the short term, but they're going to save us money in the long term and be good for our optics and help save the planet. They were like, wow, you've really gone soft. So it took a very short period of time for them to make her feel ashamed and put her back on track using the toxic materials. So what we're dealing with here is not people who are resistant or mean, dumb, evil. Okay, maybe a few of them are, but mostly we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with people who need some healing and they need support. They need strength. They need us to be behind them and at their back. And so whenever we have a failure, we can start to, in a weird way, celebrate those failures. That's what leverage obstacle means. When there's an obstacle, when there's resistance, instead of going, oh God, not again, we say, ooh, okay, tell me. Why do you hate it? No, I literally want to know everything about why you hate it, because it's an opportunity for us to understand how we can continue to craft our message even better. Like when someone expresses resistance to us, instead of just quietly leaving, it's a gift. And we can say, I don't know if any of you saw a United States broadcaster and political person, Van Jones. Absolutely adore him. If you don't know him, look up his work. During this time of extreme polarization in the United States, he had a TV show where he traveled through a part of the country that was very, very extreme and conservative. And he sat down with people on their porches and they sat in rocking chairs and drank tea and he said, I just want you to tell me everything about what you're thinking about this because I don't understand it. And they would explain everything and he'd go, okay, I hear that, but I still don't understand this. And he wasn't trying to change their mind. He was just trying to hear them. That's kind of what we need to do is Aikido with resistance. Aikido, we have to celebrate it, get closer to it instead of getting farther away from it and understand where they're coming from. And it's not going to mean that we agree with them. It's not going to mean they agree with us. We're going to learn something new about how we need to come across or craft our message and where there might be opportunities for change that we hadn't thought of before.
Great. Thank you, Cassie. Is that okay if we go for
Yeah, that'd be great.
Breakout room?
Yeah.
Do you have any question or comments in mind for the people for?
Yeah, I think a great
address
way to craft the breakout room. I'll just scoot through here for a minute. I guess I would ask yourself, to reflect on what kind of a change maker would you say you currently are? And what kind of a change maker would you like to work on becoming more of? So do you tend to be somebody who is a ranter, a Bernie Sanders, God love him, you know, we have to change the blah, da, 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 right? Are you an educator, a professor? Are you passionate? Do you build your case slowly over time? Do you have tons of statistics? Are you inspiring? And then when I was doing this work with myself, I really came to the conclusion that these are the things that I really wanted to be for myself as a change maker. Number one, awesome and inspiring, activating and enrolling, scientific and strategic, authentic and vulnerable, connected to source, and strong and compassionate. So I put this up on my wall and remind myself, are these the ways that I am being? So not what I'm saying or doing, but are these the ways I'm being? So maybe in your breakouts, you could talk about one way you are now, whether you like it or not, want to expand it or change it. And then one way that you want to work on more of being in your change making.
Okay, so it sounds good. Thank you so much. And we'll go for maybe 6 minutes into breakout rooms, share your thoughts on what you have heard or learned, any insights, and see if you can address these questions. And then we'll come back here to our last part of this.
And Marian, okay? I might suggest, if you don't mind, like 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who are still in the plenary, some icon that you need to click to go into a breakout room.
I think, yeah, I think it would have been nice to have a masterclass from each of the people in my group as well. I think they had some really good things to share. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we are back. I think everybody came back. Thank you so much for taking the time to share, connect, exchange some ideas. I would like to start by sharing keywords that stayed with me, and I was reflecting all this time was people change people, not science, nor facts, nor analysis. And most of us who are here trying to make some changes and contribute to this social transformation, we spend far too much time in informing people about the problem. And when we just present information, people build walls, and I can certainly relate to that, and I have seen that. So I would like to call on anyone from any group if you'd like to share just any insights you have had. Maybe I'm gonna call, there was a group, the second group was Richard Zimmerman, Vavreli, and Stella Young. Does any one of you would like to share any insights? I'm not going to do it with everybody, it's just like to get some insights.
We in our group had you know, some similarities and some opposites, in the sense that both Waverly and I would consider ourselves educators, but wanted to move into more of an inspiring kind of sphere. And the fact that 10% of information is really what's necessary to help people's perspectives shift and take action. And being educators, that can be a little tricky, like summarizing it down to 10%, but it makes so much sense. And it was also nice that Richard, so one of the things that I would like to do is become a little bit more calm and just be that calm presence in a room, because I feel it helps people open up around you and things. But Richard has already mastered that. So I guess I was learning a little bit from him. And he said he wanted a little bit more, you know, oomph as well. So, but yeah, it was really interesting.
Thank you, Stella. Good to hear you and to know you, Richard and Waverly were together from different places, actually quite interesting. There was another group with Norman. Norman who's joining us from Holland, Norman Grian, who's in Spain. Norman would like to share any insight you have had in your group discussion.
Okay, all of us were also educators, and I was relating to them a new experiment we're doing in our university, which is called Student in the Lead, where we did away with lectures, we did away with exams, because this was not contributing to the learning experience. So students have to make their own curriculum. And with that, so what we do is that we establish communities of learning where we combine first year, second year, third year, fourth year students into one community, and they do a project. And the project is normally tied up with a business challenge. So we have an actual company that they have to work on. They write a report, they can choose whatever they want, they can make a film, they can make a poster, they can make a scrapbook, whatever. And all that we have to do is give comments or give feedback. And the students have to reflect on the feedback. And with that feedback, they have to feed it forward. How can they use this in their future lives, in their future careers, if they were to do a master's program? So they have to reflect on this. So it's quite difficult because it tore the faculty apart, because some are really for lecturing and some are like this new concept. So yeah, so, and this is where this game-changing lecture becomes useful. So, yeah.
Thank you, Norman. It sounds a very postmodern way of approaching in education. Very interesting way of addressing that challenge of less information. One last one, maybe if I may call Sam. You were in a group with Brittany and Alide. Would you like to open your mic and just share any thought or question you may have? Thank you, Norman.
Actually, Alide would probably be better. So
Alide.
Go ahead, Alide, please.
Well, I think Sam could do it better, but let's not lose the time. We had a very nice conversation with Brittany, Sam, and me. And we tried to say for ourselves what kind of change maker we would be, which is very hard to label yourself. Brittany said she was a community builder. She is, by inviting people to go and connect with nature, go out, take out the shoes, build teams, which is, was very nice to hear. And Sam is an educator, so that was clear. He said also a little bit evangelist, and that he really likes, and I recognize that very much, to give people experiences. And I added to that, he's a very good storyteller as well, which is very good when you're an educator, of course. So in that way, we try to get to know each other and look at ourselves with this question. It's quite difficult because you like to see yourself as an inspirator, but probably other people have to say that, not yourself. And it's also clear when there is a passion, when you're really passionate about something that you like to change or that motivates you, and you are in the position to do something about it, that others like to connect to your community, to your initiative, to join. Because to have a passion for connecting with Earth, for the thriving Earth, it is how do you say that? Yeah, then you can do it together with a view for the long term, not just for the short term. But the time was much too short. Next time we take a longer breakout. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you. So I'd like to open to anyone who would like to make a specific question or comment to Kathy before we give the floor back to her, and she can give us the last points that she would like to share with us. Any comment or question? Of course, it's very, yeah, Sam, please.
Really enjoyed your presentation, Cassandra. I know you've worked a lot with this at IONS, and I know that shifting a worldview can feel very counterintuitive, especially when we're in the kinds of shifts that we're talking about. And it's a really different way of perceiving ourselves and the world and our experience in the world. And so I know IONS does that. Science and non-duality is in that realm. Can you offer anything around your experiences in that area? Because we are about shifting consciousness and perception so that action then follows naturally rather than in a forced or impositional way.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like all of these things that we've been talking about really are trying to provide the ideal conditions for the natural process of worldview shift to happen. Some of you mentioned some really, really good ones, like deeply experiential, having people out in nature, taking their shoes off, having them lie on the earth. You know, I could tell you all day long about the 1 mile island of trash floating in the ocean, but I just need to take you out there with a boat. You know, there's nothing that can compare to direct experience. And then that direct experience, as I was mentioning, has to be followed up immediately with a new story, a new possibility. And then that has to be followed up immediately or paired with an opportunity to participate. That has to be paired with feeling like you're a member of a community when you take this action, that it's not just you, but it's lots of other people and people that are famous or that you admire, or, you know, what you're in good company, even historically, you know, when you say Nelson Mandela thought this, or, you know, like you can really help people understand they're in a community. And then to provide these opportunities for healing. These are all the things that we know are conducive to worldview shift. And then, even then, we know that people will fall back and do the old behaviors again. And we learn to celebrate those times instead of being disappointed or upset or chastising. And the reason we celebrate those is that we know falling back or relapsing is a part of moving to actual worldview shift, because those opportunities show us, oh, what was missing? What wasn't attended to? Now let's attend to that. So that whole model is working on worldview shift. And oddly, you can try to do that in a small way in every talk you give. Why did I open my talk with the baby's face? Can anyone guess?
Makes us feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I said the words, I want you to have an open mind, and this is what this is saying. But what I'm really trying to do is have a little tiny bit of oxytocin released in your body, which is the opposite of cortisol. It's the opposite of your fight or flight system. Opens your mind, it dilates, it literally dilates your heart. And so those kinds of things can be constructed even in a 60-second commercial. You can say, how did I try to open their mind? What new story did I give them? What tool did I give them? What community did I give them? So it seems like such a huge process that takes many, many years, and it does. But you can also do mini worldview changes by including these elements in your emails that you send out to people. Did I give them a new story? Did I give them a community boost? Did I give them a practice or a tool they could do right away? Did I give them some, you know what I mean? So you can try to check these boxes in your communications and see if they help you. Yeah.
Good. I think all of us will think about what's the baby image that I'm bringing in this
Yeah, right,
conversation.
right.
Thank you so much. Alicia put a question in the chat box that says, is shifting consciousness the same as shifting worldviews?
That's a good question. Certainly at the Institute of Noetic Sciences and this Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination, we talk about terminology all the time. And these are all incomplete words for trying to get at something. The reason we say shift in worldview is that when you're talking about big C consciousness, which is your awareness at the most basic level of your thoughts, your feelings, your body sensations, everything that's happening in the world, that consciousness doesn't change. That is our essential self, our essential interconnected self. And so we don't need to shift that consciousness. We need to help people remove the blocks to it, because from that awareness, there's no question that we're interconnected. We know that time is a sort of an illusion, that we can move into the future, we can move into the past, that there's, it's not limited by conventional notions of space and time. And it may have even been here before you were born and will be here after you're born. So that's why I say big C consciousness. That doesn't change. This is a theory, right? This is not science, right? I'm switching to my spiritual hat. That non-dual consciousness does not change. And if we were all 100% in touch with it, we'd probably be kinder and more skillful all the time. So that's like connecting with consciousness. But our worldviews, the way we view the world, those are just stories. We've all made up stories. I could write to every single one of you after this lecture and say, what happened during Cassie's lecture? And I would get exactly 22 different stories. Like, we all have a worldview, and it filters every single thing we perceive and everything we do. So that's what we're really trying to shift.
Great, thank you. So Gria Kultanda his hand is raised. Grian is joining us from Spain, and he has worked a lot with stories and worldviews. That's all his research.
Yes.
So Grian.
Yes, my research field is worldviews and stories, traditional stories, as a way to change worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
But I am, I think, is multiple personality,
Mm-hmm.
because my first tool, way to try to change our world, was as a mystic. Then as a researcher in social sciences and educator, and finally as an activist. Then this is a very maybe schizophrenic way to address this thing. Recently, I have been thinking about the idea that we are not getting, in Extinction Rebellion, for example, in activism, we are not getting our objectives. And your lecture has been very inspiring for me, because suddenly you have been touching very important resortes in Spanish. I don't know in English. You have been touching important points in this problem. Why we are not getting results, even when we have been using non-violent direct actions and massive civil disobedience. And I have been thinking in the last time, in recent times about this. We are trying even to make a different approach. And I think that your research in this field can be very useful and inspiring for us. And I would like to say that in the end, hearing you, I have been thinking that maybe I was nearer of the best way when I was a mystic than being a social scientist or an activist, you know, because the things that you have been saying, the genuinity, to be authentic, I don't know, a lot of things that you have been saying, it was something like a community even. We had a tribe in the beginning. We had a very powerful and deep, with a deep friendship, a tribe. Then what do you think about this? Maybe we are nearer from a spiritual approach than from a scientific, social scientific approach or an activist approach. And a second question, sorry. In your work with imagination, are you working with the approaches of Henry Corbin or Carl Gustav Jung, Ibn Arabi, Sohrawardi, for example? Two questions.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, in response to the first, I mean, first of all, I feel like you are my twin or my brother from another mother, because I also have multiple ways in my life that I try to do these things. I say that information is not important, but I'm a scientist, so I spend inordinate amounts of time with spreadsheets and numbers and statistics, and I don't, you know, there's some reason I moved to do that, as well as spiritual path and activism. And I think it's a new, I think all three are so important. If we can integrate all three of those, are very, very important in the move toward a new world. And what's great is to find out what is your most powerful way of being. What do you feel the most aligned with? And sometimes we're a little alarmed when we discover which part we feel most aligned with. It's like, oh, really? I don't want to be the scientist. I want to be the inspirational, you know. But when you get aligned with what your unique purpose is in the movement, you feel a sense of ease and flow. It's just natural. It's like what you would do if you didn't have to work, if you didn't have to be paid for it. Maybe you don't get paid for it, maybe, you know, but like, what would you do because you couldn't help doing it, even if nobody listened? That's the kind of thing that you are meant to do and pursue. In terms of imagination, of course, Carl Jung is one of my inspirations, and I'd like to hear about the other people you brought up, because Carl Jung really had a download of truth around so many parts of the imagination and the shadow and the non-conscious self. And so Carl Jung is a big inspiration in the imagination work. Thank you.
We are going to give you the floor now, Kathy, for you to share with us the last key points. I just want to bring one more, and Catherine, who is just posted something on the chat box saying, how do we address the common fear of change when in fact change is all around us?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's best to acknowledge how difficult it is to make a change and to do it out loud, share it with people. You know, I have been trying for 10 years to make my meals half vegetables, a quarter protein, and a quarter complex carbs. And as an expert in change, I still haven't been able to do it. It's hard to change. That's not a complicated thing I'm trying to do, but it's hard. And asking someone to make a change that to us seems very obvious and even easy might not be for them, because we're not just asking them to change one behavior, we're asking them to change part of their identity. So if we can be more, it's like the woman CEO changing, even though she's supposed to be tough, we're asking her to overthrow some huge part of what her entire personality is, who she knows herself to be. And so we have to be humbled in the face of what we're asking people to do, even if we think it's small, even if we think it's small, or if we think it's big, but it's obvious, because we're not just asking them to do the thing or to think a certain way, we're asking them to potentially risk giving up a fundamental pillar of how they see the world, which has kept them safe for their whole life, a community that they currently are connected with. So if we say, hey, golf courses, they're really not very environmentally friendly. Like, could we not pour thousands and millions of gallons of water into golf courses? You know, you are automatically asking millions of people to give up something that has been a core part of who they are. It's not because they care about the golf and the grass. It's because that has been a place they connected with their fathers and their, you know, colleagues, and they've made deals there. And so it's like, they don't know all that. They're, you know, they don't know you're asking them to change their whole identity, but you might not know it either as a change maker. So great humility in how hard it is to change even small things.
Great humility to acknowledge how hard it is to change things. It's a good thing to say. Thank you so much, Kathy. Would you like to share with us any last thought or points, Kathy, on?
Sure, yeah, I'll just go back to one more thing that might be a good takeaway. Let's see. So I want to convey that one easy thing you can do right at the beginning, and this is true again, whether you are creating an entire website or whether you're doing one email or giving a talk or even having dinner with a relative who believes different things than you do, that when we're working on change, let's spend 1/3 of the time talking about the problem, only 1/3. And then let's spend another 1/3 talking about potential solutions to the problem. And then the final 1/3 talking about your vision for the future. So we're moving from 80% problem to 1/3 problem, 1/3 solution, 1/3 vision. And when we're talking about the problem, even then, we can say, instead of framing it as the way it is now, we can frame it as how that needs to change. So we can say something like, we are currently depositing 5 tons of plastic straws into landfills every day. We can do better. We as a community, we as a society, we as a planetary species can do better than that. So instead of saying how awful it is, you start to already appeal to people's sense of identity. Yeah, we can do better. How might we do better? Well, the solution. Sometimes you're going to have a completely baked solution. I know exactly what needs to happen, and you're promoting it. And in that case, you should say, here is my 3-step solution. So that's another rule of 3s, is most people can't process more than 3 things at a time. So if you want to provide a solution, see if you can boil it down to 3 things. We need to do the following 3 things. Number 1, we need to get the major restaurant chains to change to these biodegradable straws. Number 2, we need to change the processing of the biodegradable straws so that they can be less expensive. And number 3, whatever, right? So 3-point solution. And if you don't know the solution, that's still okay. You can ask people to join you in your exploring. I know we can do better. And in my research, I've come across 3 or 4 different programs that are doing things to address this. One is doing this, one is doing that, one is doing this, like case studies, vignettes. And so you don't have to have it completely solved, but you do need to inspire people with some case studies that are solutions. And then vision. And it sounds difficult to think, really, a whole third on vision. But yes, I envision a world where we are no longer using plastic straws, that we have these biodegradable straws. We're reducing the landfill by 10% every day. We've got students and people who are working on making these plastic straws. So we're creating jobs. And, I want you to envision a world with me where people feel more connected to the planet. So then you can take it out of just your problem and solution, but you make it even bigger. Because in the end, it's as Maya Angelou says, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So at the end of your presentation, of your email, of whatever it is, you want people to feel like, yes, 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 let's do that. I'm in. So that's a very specific tool you can take with you, the problem solution vision.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for being here with us today. I want to thank you for taking the time to share, invite everyone who wants to learn more. You can just Google Cassandra and find some of her research and even TED Talks and etc. And thank you everyone for joining us today. In this session, we have one masterclass a month from now with Rolf Winters from Holland. And thank you for supporting and joining our masterclass program of this year, 2022. Thank you, and all the best for everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.